This channel isn't really about average. We're talking about gold. And it just isn't given or earned on a bell curve, but I think that we can still make this thing relevant to all of us. Let's give it a shot. So how much gold do you need anyway? This is not a new topic around here. I've touched on it a few times because I set goals. But what happens after you hit that goal? Do you stop? The survey says no. Now I'm going to give this a few takes. I'm going to address a few common comments, but I'll also say that you don't need gold or silver. You need food or water, shelter, etc. And then you need a way to continue getting them. So really what we're talking about here is savings. Now there's a collector aspect to this as well, of course, but the most important thing to me is its value. Maybe you use it for a future opportunity, future need, or if you have something unexpected hit. Income went south, you run into an emergency expense, you'd still have a way to cover needs. Now having savings for this kind of thing is not a new idea. I've always heard you need 3 to 6 months expenses in a savings account, and that seems pretty reasonable. I've also always found that it's very easy to use those savings for other things, and that's what led me to the 3 ounces of gold idea. Now that would hypothetically be 3 months of expenses that I couldn't, or at least wouldn't directly use for other things. Now unfortunately an ounce of gold won't cover my monthly expenses these days, but we'll come back to that. So how much gold do you need? I just don't think anyone can tell you, but I think that 3 ounces is a great start. Okay, so I was out this last week and I couldn't get to all the comments, but a few stuck out because they were a bit damning and I couldn't quickly respond. Now, there were 3 or 4 that were related to the idea that not everybody can stack an ounce of gold every month, and I totally get it. This is the kind of comment, though, that I never want to reply to on a phone, quickly on a small screen, because it's so easy to fumble the intention in a thumb-typed reply. So this is my take. I think anyone who can afford an ounce of gold a month is in a fortunate place. I don't think it's normal, I don't think it's common, and I don't think that most people can or should stack at that pace. I also don't think that's the point. Now, my personal plan for a lot of years was to stack 3 ounces a year through scheduled purchases. So the 1/4 ounce a month plan worked well for me. But a 1/4 ounce a month, that might still be too much. Maybe that's too little. The only person who knows is you. Or your wife, I guess. Now, either way, though, those ideas, they're all relative. They depend on your circumstances and they depend on your end goals. Like, what do you intend to do with this stuff? So I'll just go back and say it again. Nobody needs gold or silver. You need a way to keep your family off the streets. Now, I know that this is obvious, but you probably shouldn't go so hard for gold that you aren't leaving anything left for everyday needs, everyday emergencies. Now, I like gold as a backup, and maybe that isn't even the right way to look at it. It's in addition to anything else that I have. So having gold is building the walls higher, having more comprehensive fallback options, however you want to look at it. So if something I'm doing here is giving the impression that we all need an ounce of gold a month, well, I guess I'm doing a bad job. Now on the flip side of that sentiment though, none of this is frivolous or wasteful. So I just don't feel bad talking about what I'm picking up lately. If it's more than average, well, okay, but I don't really see how that part's relevant. You won't get any pressure from me to stack an ounce of gold a month or more. I won't tell you what's average or easy or even necessary, but regardless of that amount, nothing is lost if you're doing it right. It's just converting money. Now, there is something that comes from that comment, though, that I think is relevant to everyone here, though, and that's how easy it is to sell gold. And I'm going to need to explain this one. So let's first look at your exit strategy. Since everything starts with the end, we need to know what we're working toward. Now, if you're planning to sell your gold at some point, selling 4 ounces is easier than selling 100 ounces. That's pretty basic. And I couldn't tell you what an average person's exit strategy looks like, but at the highest level, it isn't difficult. You're either going to sell or you aren't. Now, if you're never planning to sell, well, you can simply buy at whatever pace is comfortable to you. Everything else is minor. If you're going to sell, though, if you want or you need that capital back out, there's a point where selling becomes more difficult. Again, liquidating 4 ounces of gold is pretty easy, but liquidating 50 or 100 ounces, well, that takes a little bit more work. And that work or that difficulty, I think, is where the topic of how much gold is too much actually comes from. If I'm buying an ounce of gold every month, I'm probably stacking too much to say that I'm never going to sell. And if I stay at my current pace, I'll probably be selling some of it at some point. So I'll either slow that down or I'll change what I'm buying. But I'm not doing that because I have too many dollars every month and I just want to permanently get rid of them. Okay, so one of those commenters mentioned that $500 a month is the most an average person can afford. And I couldn't tell you if that's a true statement. I can't even speak to it. Maybe it is. Maybe there was some kind of study done, but probably it was an opinion. I don't know what an average person can afford. I can say, though, that personally, I liked that amount. $500 a month is what I did for years and years. That was the amount I felt comfortable putting toward gold each month for about 8 years. And at that rate, I wasn't worried about how much I needed because I didn't feel like I'd hit a point where I'd need to stop. And let me use some math here for a minute to explain this. For $500, I was grabbing a quarter ounce a month. That was 3 ounces a year, and that was about perfect. And if you would ignore that I was actually buying a little bit more along the way, 1/4 ounce a month or 3 ounces a year meant that I would have been buying what I could quickly sell each year. I could quickly sell 3 ounces. And if 100 ounces is an amount that is harder to liquidate, well, it would have taken 34 years to get to that point. So I was feeling pretty safe. So I am not a fan of average. I'm a fan of common sense. I'm not a big believer in doing something because it's what everyone else is doing. But if you take a look at the advice to have savings to cover 3 to 6 months of expenses, well, that isn't advice to have, say, $12,000. That isn't advice to have $60,000 saved. It's based on your expenses. And your gold buying is the exact same thing. We don't all need a quarter ounce of gold a month any more than we all need a specific amount of savings. And that's really how I'd like to answer those comments. But again, it's pretty easy to misinterpret the intent of a text reply. The important part of this video, I think, is to consider your exit strategy. Are you planning to sell? When? How much? You're going to hold some back to hand down to your kids? I think everyone needs to consider that and then consider what's comfortable for you. Ignore average, ignore what other people are doing. Figure out what's best for you and do it. I think that covers it. I have a few videos that I'm going to link to that are related to this idea. One is a little bit older by now, but it gets into the idea of a start-over fund based on monthly expenses. Check out the end screen in the description if you want to dive in a little bit more. But I'd like to hear what you think. I don't like average, but I think that there are probably a lot of common approaches, partially just because there are common gold weights, quarter ounce, 10th ounce, full ounce a month. There are only a handful of easy increments to pick up. So let us know what you do or what your exit strategy is. Really, that's the more important part. So while you're there, though, in the comments, be sure to hit the like button if you found any of this interesting. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on if you want to see more on the topic. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.